everyone, and welcome back. If you've just logged on, welcome to our virtual Minnesota Marketing Summit. We are going to get started with our first panel of the day, New Technology and Digital Evolution, led by Dustin Brusnick, CEO of Modern Logic. Over to you, Dustin.
Hi, everyone. Nice to virtually see you. We're going to be hosting a panel, quick conversation. We have about 40 minutes to talk about digital transformation and marketing and the effects of COVID-19, largely in accelerating existing trends. So we've assembled a good group of marketing leaders here in Minnesota to talk about this issue, and I'll let them introduce themselves. First, I'll introduce myself. I'm Dustin Brusnick. I'm the CEO of Modern Logic. We're a digital product studio based right here in Minneapolis, Minnesota. So let's kick it off with quick intros. Kristen at US Bank, Kristen Grayson.
Hi, Dustin, nice to see you again. Right now, I'm Kristen Grayson. I'm a digital marketing manager at US Bank on the digital and marketing technology team. I have been a part of organizational transformation for about 10 years, and I know we're trying to keep these short, so I'll leave it at that.
All right, let's go to Chris O'Brien with CH Robinson.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone, and thank you. I'm Chris O'Brien. I'm the Chief Commercial Officer at C.H. Robinson. We're a global tech and supply chain company here in Eden Prairie, Minnesota, and I'm accountable for our global marketing function, our customer technology, and our sales strategy.
Good. Josh Earhart with Bounteous.
Hi, everyone. My name's Josh Earhart at Bounteous. Bounteous is a big picture digital transformation agency. We help brands and other agencies assess their digital maturity, uncover opportunities within their tech stack to grow and evolve. I'm specifically interested in helping brands gain meaningful insights in data and analytics that lead to better media plans and return on investment through use of Google's marketing platform. Thanks, Dustin.
Yep. And finally, Keith Daroff. I don't think I'm pronouncing that right, with Lifetime.
Pretty darn close. Vice President of Digital Marketing, oversee our membership acquisition and retention efforts across user experience, web, mobile, digital club experience, media strategy, and e-com.
Very cool. So let's start off with our first question. This is kind of a intro. Given COVID-19 and its impact on marketing, I'm sure we've all kind of felt the effects of being remote and things moving digital. So I was thinking we'd start the conversation off there, and we can start with Kristen at US Bank. Kristen, how has this impacted your strategy? Has it accelerated it, decelerated it, and do you think it's changed it at all?
That's a great question. I would say it definitely has accelerated and changed it. I think responsiveness is now more of the name of the game than ever. Immediately when the pandemic hit and we shifted gears, we started looking at customer sentiments on a weekly basis. Adjusting to the market is incredibly important for us, and being responsive to the market, getting out those communications to clients and potential clients, letting them know that we have a pulse on what's going on, that we're here to serve them, shifting product gears even, and being able to deliver on PPP loans and things like that were an important part of our overall digital strategy, which, as you can imagine, for everyone has become more important than ever. I will say specifically US Bank is really, really great in terms of in-person, and I don't think that that's changed for the places that we are open in a limited capacity, but bringing that up to speed now more than ever in a virtual capacity has become important. So we're looking at things, we always were, but we have a hyper focus on things like personalization, on data insights. We just launched a new virtual assistant via our mobile application. How are we enhancing our mobile application and digital products? It really has, we had a strong initiative before, but that has become more important than ever.
Cool. Have you seen an increase in management's support of you to this, or is it still kind of a 50-50 digital and non-digital?
I think management was supportive before of moving the needle forward from a digital capacity. I think that, yeah, even more so now, they definitely have their eyes and ears on what's happening in the space.
So I wanted to move over to Lifetime because I think this is pretty interesting. Keith, how has Lifetime managed this? Because I know obviously a lot of what you do is physically oriented, more so than even a US Bank retail location.
So we have a pretty significant brick and mortar footprint, and specifically heavy commitment in those capital expenditures. Our health clubs are $50 to $70 million investments each. When COVID hit, it definitely amplified the overall market pressures that we felt as a company. It fragmented by state and sometimes even local county geography our operations, and even the sentiments of our members across the nation in Canada. And then more specifically, because of those economic pressures, it forced us to really make more with less, with very limited resources moving forward. So kind of what I embodied within my team on the digital front is the Mike Porter, quote, "The essence of strategy is choosing what not to do." So there were 1,000 great ideas. It was really understanding what are the things that we need to accomplish in the next, 10 days, 30 days, 60 days, and 90 days, really to set us up to have the diversification to weather the storm, but also the experiences necessary to retain the relationships that we had with our members when our brick and mortar, oftentimes under governor orders, had to be closed. So there was a strong focus on demand and streaming classes. Group fitness is very much a community-oriented experience. As people are shut away at stay-at-home orders, it became invaluable for us to continue to deliver those experiences. Virtual training became something that we'd already been playing with in a few different pilots. So we fast-tracked the rollout of that in under 2 weeks. And then looking at robust creative and syndicating that. So we were luckily already sitting on a 10-year relationship with a magazine, Experience Life, which was really driven by editorial, not advertorial content in an award-winning sense. So tapping into our investment in that over the previous decade, ensuring that got in front of our members. And then finally, probably the most important thing, because everybody was seeking information at this point, was understanding and meeting our members with empathy and transparency on where we were with reopenings, where we were with their membership status, where we were with various amenities. Unlike a big box like a Target or a Home Depot, we don't have just general hours where we open the front doors and we can operate at 100% capacity or even 100% of our overall business product category. So our cafes, our salons and massage, our kids camps, swim lessons, personal training, group fitness, cardio floors, all essentially had different logistics that we had to manage at a local geography level with governmental, health officials and state government agencies and panels. So it has been a exciting, tumultuous, but ultimately, I come back to not only the Michael Porter quote. I don't know who cites this one, but calm waters don't make skilled sailors. So it's been a great opportunity to lead. It's been a great opportunity for my team to step up and take on a new mantle of responsibility for our company.
So speaking of empathy, I like the empathy approach to marketing. And have you found that it's easier to connect with a certain audience using these technologies, or are you seeing an expansion of the audience with COVID-19?
Yeah, so we actually put a lot of our content out there outside of authentication. What we wanted to do from an empathy perspective is not encumber our members with logins and access and other challenges. And so we actually released a free version of our app. We posted our on-demand videos on YouTube in addition to our app as well as our website. Virtual training by nature needs to have a more personal connection, so that was through authentication. But we tried to break down as many barriers as possible. We also put all of our memberships on hold, essentially paused all dues and drafts. We allowed our members actually now through the end of the year to essentially put their membership on hold, still get access to some of our virtual tools. The goal really is to enrich the relationship, to take this time to develop equity behind the brand, and essentially invest in the long-term value that typically we look at from a revenue generation perspective. In this point, we're actually taking into account kind of the soft brand equity of it, even though revenue isn't always associated with the relationship that we had with some of our members.
Interesting. And one more question, then we'll move on to C.H. Robinson and see what's happening in logistics. I was wondering if you're seeing a demographic shift, or if you're having to do any training for either really young people or older folks who might not be so technology savvy. As you engage with them, marketing, they might be more traditionally like to be engaged in, say, mailing campaigns or more traditional marketing methods.
Yeah, we definitely saw skews. We see skews within our swipe data. So, members coming back to the club when they're coming back, but more so than the demographic skews, what we're really seeing are psychographics. So, and that's oftentimes driven by the part of the country that you're sitting in. And that's where we see more of that segmentation as far as what they're participating in, how often are they participating in it, how much what's the mix of their virtual consumption versus their in-club brick and mortar consumption. Even their level of interest and support is ranging dramatically. And I think we also saw this geographically as different parts of the country opened up earlier than others, or more aggressive or more conservative than others.
Yeah, interesting. Just pop back to Kristen real quick. Are you seeing the same thing, or are you seeing that your demographics, I guess, and psychographics are changing for your consumption of .com and mobile, or are they basically just accelerating trends that you were seeing prior?
Right, so it's a little bit of both. Obviously, the people that are inclined to gravitate towards more digital experiences anyway increase their uptick. But of course, we also saw an uptick in people that we don't necessarily see on those channels as well. And we do have to bridge that gap at the in-person level at times and bring people up to speed who aren't maybe traditionally used to operating in that space or don't like to.
Yeah. I think we've all had to learn a lot about digital, even those of us who are really digitally savvy. So I can't imagine the 80-year-old who wants to interact with the U.S. Bank and mobile, first phone, etc. So let's pop over to Chris and say, what is C.H. Robinson doing with marketing, and how's your world changed in the last 6 months?
Yeah, well, a little different for us in that the freight never stopped or slowed down, really. It was certainly in different parts, different commodities were way off, but we're global, so there was always something. In fact, it was probably even a little bit more challenging as things spiked. But we're 100% B2B, and we have anywhere from a giant global company to an entrepreneur who'll use our self-serve app to just go ship something. So we've always relied that a connection between marketing and sales has gotten stronger, but maybe not in ways that I hear some of my peers talk about. So we essentially never slowed down from a sales standpoint because we were set up. Marketing primarily supported a phone selling, inside sales universe for the most part, with this big breadth of, most everybody ships something. And so what we found was that the people that we sell to actually had a little bit more time. And from a marketing and sales standpoint, it was never really marketing to the rescue. Like I hear from some of my peers, our salespeople can't talk to anyone anymore. They can't travel. So we didn't have that sort of we're dying out here type of reaction, but a lot did change. And the first thing I think is just that our B2B purchasers, procurement leaders, have a little bit more time. They're not wasting it in airports. And so we feel like it's been an advantage a bit from a sales and marketing standpoint, but we did partner those two up a little bit more through this. First from training, we stopped calling it virtual training, and we took the approach that some part of this will stay forever. COVID, we hope, will be behind us someday, but there's just so many factors out there. From one, like our own experiences, we flipped a switch and the next day everyone's working and the tech works from home. We don't think are going back to the same levels of travel. So we didn't look at it this as sort of temporary, batten down the hatches and see what happens to work virtually. We talked about it. This is remote. It's not virtual work. It's real work and real marketing and real sales. So we were able to do more training. The tech seems like it just got easier. People are publishing their own videos in Teams in 5 minutes and sending them out. So our ability to connect, we did invest in webinar technology. That was one of the first things that we did, is we recognized that field was going to get more important as we saw that people were signing up in greater numbers. So we got smarter about that right away. And I think there's been sort of this unintended dividend of the investment, is that not only I think we're meeting more, but the technology itself has allowed us to bring in more experts, a marketing expert, a procurement expert, a customs, China networks on all of our calls. It just got a lot easier to bring everyone together. And again, that's why I think there's some inertia on this that's going to last. And we've all learned kind of so the freight's kept going, but from a sales and marketing standpoint, I would say in an odd way, it's been a net positive for us.
Yeah, I mean, I think the numbers bear out, consumerism's still up. People are buying, we're all sitting on Amazon trying to surf and find that next thing. Have you found that your customers are more willing to engage, or have they been gun shy on sort of big ticket purchases? Have you had to change any of your strategy around convincing them to do bigger expenses, for example? Because we know a lot of businesses have started to hold back a little bit on their investment.
Yeah, so we immediately changed some of our general messaging to take cost out of your supply chain, do more with less. People were willing to engage because they had more time and they were more thoughtful processes, probably more RFPs in our big value added, global outsource space, but they weren't willing to spend more. And so, which is not generally our first approach anyway, is how can we help you spend more? But that the messaging that we put out there from a marketing standpoint did adjust to trying to do more with less. And we did feel that was a change in behavior with budgets getting tight and so many companies, in the markets that we serve being really impacted by COVID.
Yeah. So Josh, I want to bring you in here. I know Bounteous is a B2B company as well. And what have you seen?
Well, Bounteous is in the digital transformation space. So fortunately for us, this has been a time of unprecedented growth. To relate to something Chris had shared a little bit earlier, I think it's been easier to get alignment on the brand side and to get folks at the C-suite engaged in a digital transformation effort. So I feel as though COVID has really accelerated things related to digital transformation and digital maturity assessments. So that's made my job a little bit easier. We do a lot of training, in-person training at brands and agencies when we're training them on Google Marketing Platform. And that's been a big adjustment for us as we move that to a virtual platform as opposed to in-person training. To share maybe a client story, we recently partnered with Mars Candies to help them develop Treat Town, which is an interactive virtual reality Halloween trick-or-treating experience. Mm-hmm. So it's an example of a way a brand like Mars is trying to re-envision how is Halloween going to take place in COVID. And this experience is now becoming digital through AR and augmented reality. It's a new monetization channel for them, a new revenue stream, a new way to collect data, a new way to engage with customers despite the environment that we're in. So it's just an example of how brands and agencies are leaning in during this time. And despite the challenges, it's been really inspiring for me to see the growth and acceleration in the digital maturity space.
I want to move a little bit more into specifics, and I think the Mars is a really interesting one to start. So how are you thinking in terms of, and this is for Josh, modern technologies like AI, machine learning, and AR, VR in terms of people's marketing strategies versus, I guess, traditional marketing, as you would say? Are you having to do a lot of education as you talk to these marketing people? Are you finding they're savvy? And then as you sort of engage, how are you thinking about which technologies make sense to apply and which ones don't?
Sure. I would encourage anybody that's thinking about AI to really look inward at your workflow first, because I think with AI, it's really easy to get kind of enamored with the tech, but what it's supposed to solve for is efficiencies in your business. So if you find in the search example that you're spending a lot of times adjusting your bids, there are automation tools that allow you to run that better, to run search better. So it's really about how can you make AI work for your existing marketing workflow, for your existing MarTech, and elevate what you're currently doing rather than kind of completely reimagine it. Hopefully that answers your question.
Yeah, and specifically, are you seeing more AI and machine learning? Are you seeing a lot of AR, VR? That's something I hadn't heard of in our prep for this, but that's really interesting.
I think the challenge for brands is how do we make our experience of brick and mortar, if you're a retail business, maybe a retail bank, how do we make that experience digital? And how do we still win there despite having a competitive advantage of being an in-person business? So in a lot of cases that leads to virtual reality if you were really an in-person experience, how do you translate that to the digital world? So I think inherently there's some of that, but it only makes sense for certain businesses.
Are you seeing some businesses put out experiences and then not have clients engage or customers engage? Or are you seeing an uptick in engagement as well because everyone's sitting at home looking for something to do?
I think there's definitely a huge uptick in engagement. The big trend that I see right now is really trying to unify experiences. Brands have experiences that happen in app, in browser, on desktop, and trying to connect all of the data between these interactions and really map out the user and their experience is probably the biggest trend that I'm seeing, just trying to get a handle on what's actually happening today. As far as like AR and VR, again, I think it's more of a niche thing. The Mars example is something that's really shiny because it's cool and the holidays coming up, but we're not really seeing that everywhere.
Right. I see Kristen nodding along. Kristen, what's US Bank doing with technologies, and how are you thinking about new technologies and machine learning?
Well, I do think the focus on predictive analytics and understanding our customer and responding to that customer where they are is a hyper focus. But that said, I would say that an emerging trend is to actually understand, an emerging trend of the financial industry and banks in general is to really understand what a customer is doing in real time or what customers are doing in real time and be able to be responsive. Now, we can do that on social media, and we can do that within certain sentiment of our marketing programs, but can we do that right now, real time, across experiences, whether you're in branch or meeting with your financial advisor or on our application in a mass way that allows us to make daily adjustments? No. And so I do think that that is something, though, that would be a focus of the financial industry in the next 5 years or 2 years, depending on how long this lasts.
Let's hope it's 2 years and not 5 years. It's the first time I've heard 5 years. Now I'm a little freaked out. So, Keith.
That said, I would say that, I mean, I agree with, I don't know if anybody was on for the Cambria keynote earlier. I don't think that in-person is going anywhere. In fact, this sort of forced digital inertia is going to push people back the other way, and they're going to crave in-person experiences, and making those as robust as possible and using one to augment the other is going to be an important part of the game.
Keith, you have those in-person experiences as well. I wanted to jump to you. And are you using machine learning to do any real-time targeting, or are you using AI? And how do you expect to use those kind of in the next couple of years to engage with your customers?
So we've been using AI and predictive analytics for probably a little bit more than the past 4 years, but it's primarily been executed within business silos. And so the easiest place to start oftentimes is in marketing and finance. How that infiltrates in-person or brick and mortar becomes far more complicated, and traditionally has been kind of the vestige of CRM systems. So from our playing with it in the last 4 odd years, it's primarily from a media optimization perspective. So playing with vendors like Tropica, Simplify, Smartly, Kick Factory that does natural language processing, Adobe Media Optimizer, though more algorithmic than it is, ML or AI on Adobe's front. But as Josh was speaking, it's essentially optimizing, essentially bringing scale to thousands of micro decisions every day based off of probabilistic modeling for the most part. Then you go to something a little more advanced like media mix modeling and attribution modeling. We've been working with Neustar to develop models over the last 2 years, and that's taking both your online and a variety of offline data and really doing advanced regression analysis initially to set up your model, and then turning ML on top of that really to learn in real time and then predict out what are the puts and calls from a marketing investment, and that gets you into the ROMI and ROAS, return on ad spend, return on marketing investment arenas. From a CX or UX perspective, again, looking digitally, not impacting the in-person greeting and experiences that happen within our clubs. you've got things like for your CMS system, Adobe Sensei, that you can turn on to, automatically personalize and customize your website. Salesforce Einstein, so that can impact your CRM, it can impact your email campaigns through ExactTarget, or you start looking at like a Merkle or a Pega from a loyalty or marketing automation perspective. That then you can start piping into multiple touch points. So then as you're reaching consumers, you're creating a consistent experience, whether they're engaging with an email, they're jumping into your app, they're coming into your location, et cetera. And then finally, I kind of talked about, finances being another great starting point. Is oftentimes you've got a lot of legacy systems that are running your financial analysis. So bring in something like an APT, Applied Predictive Technologies, or bring in a Domo. Essentially, it's basic. You can start with basic modeling, and then you can start turning, machine learning on top of that to look at price elasticity, lifetime value, statistically stable controls versus exposed groups versus you as a leadership group picking what products or what locations you want to compare to each other. And it just starts advancing the overall, I think, dialogue. But to, I think what Kristen was saying, it doesn't immediately, any of those silos don't immediately drive your business operations, because the structure of your organization is pretty much based on legacy business and management hierarchy. And so you don't see a lot of incumbent players in the marketplace that have been around for more than 20 years that have truly shifted to be a business intelligence or AI driven company and operating model, like what you see with a Netflix or an Ant Financial or a lot of the other companies that have come into their own, that we all look at and go, we need to start doing stuff like them. Because a lot of us are on the outside looking in, and it's really an organizational structural change, but also a cultural change that needs to happen. So for the foreseeable future, I think a lot of AI in a lot of companies is going to be siloed by discipline within the organization.
Sure. Are you seeing the change happening incrementally or revolutionary in your organization? And how are you approaching the pace of change so that you can still get your job done, as all these things seem to be moving very rapidly?
Yeah, I see it being driven incrementally. I think your investor group, your board, and your C-suite are going to play critical roles in driving massive change management. So I think you're going to start looking for leadership that has a learn mindset, because AI isn't something that you can sit down in a meeting and always explain why the system did what it did. Oftentimes it refutes the status quo or the prevailing wisdom within an organization. And as a leader who is shepherding or sitting on top of that AI tool, you're not going to know why it does what it does. And that puts you in a very vulnerable position, because traditionally when you're doing multivariate testing or other ways of systematic learning, you can explain why something happened. You can explain why the focus group liked this, or why why version A was better than version B. But if you watch AlphaGo, which is a great Netflix documentary on Google's AI that tackles Go, which is orders of magnitude more complicated than chess, even the top data scientists are sitting there going, I don't know why it did that move. I don't know why it's playing out this strategy. And that's just describing the dynamics of a game on a board with stones, let alone the dynamics of your business. So to get comfortable with turning your business operations and decisions over to an AI tool is a very fundamental shift in how you manage the day-to-day within an organization, at least a legacy one, and the ones I've been part of historically.
Yeah, the quote I'd heard on AlphaGo is the masters of Go, the human masters of Go, played AlphaGo, and they started getting beat pretty quickly, pretty resoundingly. And one of the foremost masters in the world said, we don't know if we will ever be able to beat AlphaGo ever again, because it doesn't play like a human player. It doesn't think like a human player. It plays Go differently than anyone has ever played Go, and in a way that we can't understand or learn to understand. So it's a really interesting analogy. One of my interests when we move into these, as we start moving to these algorithmic driven marketing, is how do we manage to connect with our end customer in a way that makes sense, that we can describe, versus letting the machines do all the connecting for us? Are we losing touch with that customer connection, where normally we used to have, 5, maybe 10 user profiles? Now we can have 1,500. How do you recommend approaching that? Let's go to Josh, because I know you handle a lot of things. I really liked what Bounteous did with Domino's, for example.
Sure. I think it really has to do with speed and agility. If you really want to connect your personalization efforts that you're engaging on in your website or with your CDP, you need to have marketing tools and technology that connects to those silos that Keith was talking about. You need to be able to connect the data sources to media activation in order to really get those insights in a meaningful way. So you mentioned Domino's. With Domino's, we were able to segment their users and understand what message was going to motivate a loyalty customer of Domino's to purchase a pizza at a certain time. And maybe one customer, it's a tweet, maybe one customer, it's a social engagement on Facebook, and maybe another, it's an email. And using segmentation and analytics, we're able to determine what is the right media mix, the right message, and the right time to get that customer into the funnel to buy some pizza. We've delivered some great results for Domino's. So I think that's the promise of what this can do. But I think for a brand, what you need to be concerned with is, do I have the right tools to give me the speed and agility to act on the insights that my data is giving me? And by the time that I have those insights, are they already too old to be useful in this marketing world that changes every day? So you need to have the tools at your disposal and to be able to operate in an agile way.
So I want to make sure I bring in C.H. Robinson. There's sort of two interesting things that came up here. Is, one, C.H. Robinson's an older organization. How are you evangelizing this and explaining what this technology can do to the C-suite and to your managers, and especially given that you don't know kind of what's coming out of the box, or what's coming out of it, but why it's coming out of it can be confusing. And then in addition, as a B2B company, how are you thinking about machine learning in terms of reaching out to business customers, as opposed to, consumers are easy because there's lots of them, right? There's lots of business customers, but a lot less.
Yeah, I don't have to do a lot of evangelizing. It was interesting. Keith mentioned that, a lot of AI is done in silos. I'm thinking about it for the first time, but that's where we are. And I think largely the tools are different, and the tech and the companies are different, and operational AI versus marketing automation, that might drive some of it. But for us, it starts in processing so many documents around the world and setting appointments around the world. That's where a lot of our machine learning started. I won't take a ton of time on AI for marketing here, because we're relatively new. We just upgraded to Sensei, and we like what we see so far. We do all of our, we're market, although it's B2B, we market everything. We're trying to get calls to action out there. It's, we have a completely, app-driven self-service model that is about, there's a million small companies in North America, and we're not going to reach those with, a human-centered sales force. So although we're at the beginning stages of it, when I think about it from my lens of marketing, sales, and customer management, I think that I don't know that the tools will need to be different for B2C than they will be to B2B. They're largely the same. It's about getting the right interest. And I just think that when I look 5 or 6 years down the road, I think that as an industry, marketing, we're going to need to come up with some new tools. And I think there'll be this point of time driven by privacy law, or just right now retargeting for B2B might be a little bit cute so far. Pretty soon it's going to be more creepy and annoying if it's not already. And I just think it's so important that what you can get from AI and targeted, retargeted, remarketed, the advantage is so big that I don't want to lose it. But I just feel like we're so dependent on those plays that I think are going to get old soon. And then email too. I don't know if the consumer is any different, but the business buyer is just almost, I think the tool will go away. And we're pretty dependent on a couple of things that I think are starting to become, if not already, gigantic annoyances. So when I look at where we're going to go long term as a, say, the marketing industry, I think I'm hoping that AI can find maybe a gentler way to guide us to the right types of contacts when you want to see them versus ways that you didn't. And I don't even know, where this is going to go, but as we enter this phase of using AI, I I see it's getting us to adjust quicker, but I feel like the whole medium of how you reach out is what's in danger right now, and that's what I don't see too many companies working on. I don't know if that helps.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I think it gets at a couple interesting points. One is the privacy, how do you connect with people, both where they want to be connected, but also where they don't want to connect with you, right? And that's changing over time. I agree with you. Email in particular is probably going to be dying. I know, Kristen, you had some thoughts on this when we talked earlier about, in particular, around how you connect with your customer in a world where you know maybe more about them than they want you to know.
That's exactly right. So when I say, here's where I think banking could possibly go, and some banks are already there, like they are collecting real-time data on what the person is doing from the moment they walk into the door, from the moment they pick up on the mobile app. They have streams of this. And I'm just saying how you regurgitate that back to a customer has the highest possible opportunity to offend them, especially when you're talking about their finances. So I do think it's a really, really delicate balance between understanding them and letting them know that you understand them, and letting them know that you're not doing anything invasive to understand them. And you're certainly not, that is a private, still within the confines of that agency, in this case, a financial institution situation between you and them. And any other third-party interaction, they have to really understand that in order, what it is and how it's obtained and why it's regurgitated back to them in the way that it is, and that has to be comfortable for it to move forward in the way that it could, right? So just because you can do something, people are annoyed with how invasive Facebook is. They're somewhat annoyed with how invasive Netflix is, and that's just like their streaming preferences. So when you're talking about something as sensitive as finance, it does become a great deal more complicated.
Do you do any sort of looking at financial behaviors to drive your marketing insights, or is that basically off limits from the marketing perspective?
Right, it's not off limits, but it is not, there's no first party data that I would have access to, for example.
Sure.
Yeah. But no, it's right. We have a rich data insights team that collects many different data points.
Right. It's I don't know if you saw the people's credit card behavior being tied to COVID-19 spread earlier this year. But you can basically pick up whether people are out at restaurants using their credit cards and say, these people, because they were at restaurants, are more at risk of getting COVID-19. And that is a power that must be wielded lightly, I think. I want to go to Keith before we wrap up and just get Lifetime's perspective on that. I know Lifetime is another situation where you have something that people care deeply about that's deeply personal as you interact with them.
Yeah, no, segmentation in the new world order is challenging. I think we've all become really familiar and comfortable with, as marketers, managing 3 to 10 personas, talking about Bill, talking about Sally, talking about, Susan, and how they engage with your product, and, through your, value chain, if you will. And when you start, tapping into AI or even advanced, predictive analytics, you start breaking those 5 golden personas into 1,500. Then you have to start managing the marketing, the creative, the language, and the delivery of the experience behind that in a consistent manner. And it becomes a thread that you start pulling from that sweater that becomes, infinitely complex, because it's not just what I can put on the website or in the app. It now needs to be delivered in the outreach through the email. It needs to be supported when they walk into and check into our club at the front desk. If they go talk to someone in member services, or they chat online for support, or talk with their personal trainer. How do you continually deliver on that visibility to those previous interactions? Because while we see it as individual operations or departments within Lifetime, they view Lifetime as Lifetime. And this is no different than when I worked on Target or on Ameriprise Financial or a variety of other kind of CPG or retail or financial service brands. But I think the expectation has been elevated by a lot of other data-driven organizations. And I think we have a few of those unicorns that we can all name. And so the expectation is that, well, if I'm spending money with you, you need to be just as good as Amazon or Netflix that I'm spending $10 a month with, or with this. And so there's also this perception with different various price points, especially for the luxury brands, that you're delivering on these luxury experiences. And that's where I think AI is moving towards. I think you can look at a lot of different things that AI is moving towards, but one of them is bringing efficiency and effectiveness to microtransactions. And that doesn't mean purchase transactions or commerce, but it's an exchange of value in knowing the consumer. And I agree with Kristen as well as Chris, it can't be spooky, but it needs to be meaningful. And I think that's the other thing, is the systems and our organizations need to learn what meaningful feels like and means. And so I think we're going to start talking in the future, especially if you have great UX designers in your team. Well, what does that feel like? Not just what does it do from a percentage of a conversion rate, or how do we track that through an attribution model, but how does your team member feel about it? How does your client or customer or member feel about it? We're going to start blending that qualitative with quantitative, hopefully in the future.
I think that's good points, and we're gonna have to end it there. I could have this conversation all day long, but fortunately we're 1 minute over already. So thanks everyone for participating. I think this was a great conversation. I hope people in the audience learned something, and you know, keep on keeping on. Hopefully not for 5 more years though.
Thank you, everyone. I want to thank all of our panelists, and now we will be having our next networking break. We will see everyone at 2:15 for our next panel, Differentiation and Engagement Through Content.